We would like to thank our sponsor, Old Dominion University. Learn more about their commitment to higher education at odu.edu. This is College Matters from the Chronicle.
I think when you step back a little, you begin to see the ways in which higher education at its best and its worst really mirror the American psyche.
Higher education isn't an American invention, but few institutions reflect the hopes and anxieties of our great democratic experiment as richly as the roughly 4,000 colleges that dot the country's landscape. Today on the show, we're celebrating the nation's 250th birthday with a big question. What makes American higher education American? I'll dive into that question with my colleague Andy Thomason, an assistant managing editor at the Chronicle of Higher Education. Andy, welcome back to College Matters.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Andy, the 4th of July has come and gone. We've launched all the fireworks. We've gorged on the potato salad. We've gazed into the green reflecting pool. But I think there's one thing left to do. We need to talk about what makes higher education quintessentially American. I know you've been racking your brain about this. What have you come up with?
Well, Jack, first of all, it is a really strange time to be asking ourselves this question about how does higher education align with the American identity? Because so much of what's been in the air recently has been this idea that higher education is actually out of step with what the American public wants from it. Is it too expensive? Is it too insular? But I think when you step back a little, you begin to see the ways in which higher education at its best and its worst really mirror the American psyche. It is a site of individual freedom and exploration. It's a forum for some really uncomfortable debates. The college campus can be a beacon of progress, of social and technological advancement. And Jack, I think the founding fathers would be pleased to know that the college campus remains a fantastic place to get wasted. And what is more American than that?
Well, Andy, I'm glad you brought up beer, and I will have more to say about that as the show goes on, I promise. But you hit on something I think we should dig into, which is how higher ed represents both really the best and worst impulses of the country. I think in its best form, a college can help deliver the American dream. It makes possible this idea that anyone can come here from anywhere in any station in life and be successful if they work hard and put their mind to it. But we also know that colleges have a really uneven record about creating social mobility for students. There's a growing body of research out there now from Raj Chetty and others that shows what a lot of us already feel in our guts, which is that it's a lot easier to get ahead in this country if you're born into a wealthy family. And if you want to live out this true rags to riches story, really the best place to do that is at an Ivy Plus college. They really have the best record of truly changing a person's fortunes. But the problem is, as you might guess, is that you're a lot less likely to get into such a college if you're poor or even if you're middle class. So it's true that colleges can help people achieve the American dream, but it's also true that those opportunities are very unevenly distributed.
Well, that's the thing about the American dream, Jack. It's right there in the concept. It's a dream. It's an aspiration. Sometimes it's not reality, right? And as you pointed out, like this is a very present, live debate that's happening on college campuses right now. To me, it centers on the institution of the SAT, right? When you think about college admissions and getting in, you think about the SAT. Well, right now, as many of our listeners may already know, there is a furious debate happening about whether colleges should use the SAT. During the pandemic, a lot of them went to test optional, which is when, it's like, send me your test scores, don't send me your test scores. They're not required. And the Horatio Alger story was kind of inside of the motivation to do that because it was about, let's open the gates a little wider because, the SAT can be positively correlated with things like family wealth, things that are more exclusive.
Yeah, the idea if you had a bunch of tutors and extra help and all of the things that rich families could afford, you're going to do better on this test.
Exactly. And then as a couple of years went by, colleges started to see troubling signs in terms of what students were capable of who were admitted under that regime. Now, this is a hotly debated topic, right? But the academic preparedness is at the core of it. There was this notable University of California at San Diego report that found that students were way less prepared in topics like math coming into a test blind regime. And so colleges, a bunch of colleges have started reinstating requiring the SAT. And one of the reasons that they cite is actually the SAT can be a measure of finding more low-income applicants who have pushed through their obstacles and have nonetheless been able to nail a high score and show that they are college material, right? So that notion of meritocracy is inside this very live debate.
Yeah. And I think that that's another way in which colleges are being held to this hyper-American standard, that it's really part of our job to seek out people who might not think that they can come here and find them. And so the SAT debate is sort of a live version, as you say, of that. I think the other thing that we expect colleges to do is to reflect the demographics of the country. And of course, this has gotten more complicated in a post-affirmative action environment. But our colleagues at the Chronicle have done some of their own work looking at this recently. And we are at a place now where non-white students now make up the largest share of American universities' enrollments. And minority students represent about half of the enrollment at American universities now. It's about 8.9 million students. So this is really a sea change in just how colleges look and the degree to which they reflect the diversity of the country. Even while we're having all of these furious debates about DEI, these demographic changes are coming to higher education. Not in equal measure across all institutions by any means, but if you look at the broad trends, that's true. It hasn't happened as much with faculty. Again, despite all the concerns about hiring of minority faculty through DEI initiatives, it's still about 7 in 10 faculty who are white, according to the Chronicle's data on this stuff. So higher ed does and doesn't look like the country if you're talking about its Americanness, which I think is significant.
Absolutely. And we all have a different, in our own ways, skewed idea of what America is. But the data are authoritative in showing us the way that the demographics are changing on campuses. I want to switch focuses, Jack, and ask you about something that I think embodies an American spirit that embeds itself into the institution of the college campus. So I was just reading about a debate that's happening over the 3-year college degree, which is a new innovation that is gaining some steam out there. The idea being that, and this is in Massachusetts, the Board of Education just approved a 3-year degree for a couple of colleges there, and it's set off a real furious debate. The AAUP and the AFT Teachers Union have come out and denounced this effort as cheapening the student experience. Now, when I first read about it, I thought, well, here's an example of college's consumer product getting shrunk, right? I wanted to ask you is this an example of Americans' love for goods that grow increasingly less expensive, more accessible?
I think it's really good that you brought this up, Andy. So you mentioned the AAUP. Of course, this is the American Association of University Professors, this sort of college governance group. They've come out and said, hey, if you try to do a degree in 3 years, you're going to be watering down education. And what a lot of these institutions are doing is they're getting rid of a lot of electives, and they're saying, hey, these degrees are larded up with all kind of stuff you don't really need in order to get a job. And so it speaks to like a broader tension in higher education about what college is really for and whether students are wasting too much time finding themselves as opposed to preparing themselves for the workforce. This is a classic tension within higher education that I think is exhibited in the 3-year debate. But yes, if you want to talk about the Americanness of this debate, Americans love cheap goods. We will outsource jobs, ignore bad labor practices, and burn through fossil fuels to get what feels like a good deal. People don't want to ask a lot of questions about what's in the proverbial hot dog. They want a cheaper, faster degree, and I think this is speaking to that. I do think that as much as we see higher education now as more of a private good, as more of a commodity that is bought and sold, there is still this lingering tension, particularly advocated by faculty, that we ought not to look at higher ed in the same way that we look at a bar of soap. But I do think that there is a strong cultural and economic incentive to deliver this faster and more cheaply, and that's a very American notion.
And there's something other than just the spirit of consumerism in this story, Jack. I mentioned the AAUP speaking out against the 3-year degree. Professors speaking out, as elitist as they're often portrayed as being, speaking your mind to your boss is a very American concept, right?
Yeah, I felt that way when you were my editor. That's what I often reminded you.
And I didn't listen, Jack. I put my sound down on mute when we were on Zoom, and I just let you jaw until you were done.
I thought it was very anti-American of you, quite frankly. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity to discuss it.
Oh, good. Well, let's open the forum. I think that there is this idea of professors believing, especially if you're tenured, I can do what I want to do. I'm free to direct my own research, to teach the way I want to teach. There is some of that don't tread on me identity there, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think it's getting a lot harder, though, because the traditional mechanisms for speaking truth to power in the academy are really under threat now. I mean, we know tenure is dying as an institution. I talked to Deepa Das Acevedo a few months ago on this show about her book, The War on Tenure. She thinks only about 10 to 20% of people who want to become professors get tenure track jobs now. This is staggering. I mean, no one who wants to be a tenured professor is probably going to get to be one. And this is historically the protection that allowed you to talk smack to your boss, right? This allowed you to say things that were controversial because you had some of these protections. So that's fading away. But it's not just tenure that's going away. It's the mechanisms by which faculty express their discontent. The most common tool that faculty use to say that we're mad about something is the no confidence vote. And our colleagues at the Chronicle have studied this. There has certainly been a rise in no confidence votes. And if you vote no confidence in your president, about half of them leave within a year, is what our analysis shows. So it is kind of effective to do this, but I think it's getting harder to do that in part because there's been a systematic effort to get rid of faculty senates. We just saw Auburn University, where I have a degree from Auburn. They just dissolved their faculty senate. We're seeing moves like this in Texas to do away with the Senate too. Does this mean faculty can't still hold some kind of no confidence vote? I'm sure they can. But the traditional fora in which this has happened is starting to go away. The armor of tenure is starting to go away. So all of the ways in which faculty were able to express discontent are under threat in a lot of ways. And I think students feel that way too, right?
I was going to mention the other constituency that likes to speak out and express their discontent is students. And ever since the Gaza encampments, colleges have been enshrining new speech and protest codes, restricting the ways that students can gather to protest, right? You can only protest during the day. These are the types of signs that are permitted. You can't chalk on sidewalks, right? So even that very historic emblem of democratic participation, student protests, is also being restricted.
I was looking back at some coverage of the Declaration of Independence, Andy.
Your preparation for this podcast, Jack, is truly unmatched.
I did some homework. I should clarify, we're not historians. We are observers of higher education. But, I have YouTube like everybody, Andy. And there's a great one out there about the Declaration of Independence. And, we think a lot about the preamble, but the Declaration of Independence also contained 27 grievances written to King George, which sounds very faculty to me. I think this is a super important thing if you're an academic. You can't have a round number of grievances, Andy. If you say 30 or 25, it's like you guys just made this up. 27, now that means you've thought about these. I don't know how many professors were involved in this, but that felt very faculty to me.
Well, I was going to say, Jack, you're giving them free ideas. I think tomorrow we're going to be writing about, the University of Alabama professor who nails 27 grievances to the president's door.
I think that was 95, Andy, but who's counting?
Yeah, that's right. I'm mixing church and state here, Jack. Talk about America.
You are, and that is strictly prohibited in this forum, Andy. Let's take a break, and we'll talk about this on the other side. Stick around. We'll be back in a minute. Higher education is facing a defining moment, and Old Dominion University is leading the way. Through forward-focused digital transformation, ODU is building the intelligent university. Old Dominion is redesigning its core systems to eliminate structural friction for students, embed AI fluency across all disciplines, and empower faculty and staff within a unified, data-informed ecosystem. Discover how Old Dominion is shaping the future of higher education at odu.edu. Hey everyone, we'd like to invite you to join the College Matters Summer Book Club. We're going to be reading Stoner, a 1965 higher ed focused novel by John Williams. We hope you'll read along with us and look for an episode on August 5th devoted to the novel. We'd also love to hear from you. Send us a brief voice memo, about 90 seconds is good, to collegematters@chronicle.com, and we may play it on the show. Be sure to tell us your name, where you're from, and what you think this novel has to say about higher ed. Meantime, have a neat summer. Andy, you really can't talk about America without talking about freedom of speech, and I think the biggest free speech story to come out of higher education in recent years concerns Charlie Kirk. After Charlie Kirk was murdered on a college campus last year, there were a number of faculty who came out and said, this wasn't a very good person. He did and said some horrible things. And the backlash from conservatives was swift and extreme. Several professors got fired over this kind of thing, but they've been fighting back in court. What do you make of how this is all playing out?
Well, Jack, there's no more illustrative example about the tension around the value of free speech as it's practiced on college campuses than this story. Just last week, we saw a University of Tennessee professor who won a $1.9 million settlement after being fired for speech about Charlie Kirk. And we knew there would be First Amendment issues for these employees who were fired for their speech. But I think what we're seeing now is a willingness on campus's part to pay out these big settlements because the negative publicity was more harmful to them than the eventual big dollar amounts that they'd have to pay.
Right.
But what this shows is like, what is permissible speech is still very much a live and fraught issue on college campuses. And that does feel very American.
No, it is. And that debate has always been, I mean, you would go back to the free speech movement at Berkeley or the Charlie Kirk firings now, and speech debates, colleges are just absolutely like laboratories of how the country works this out. And it's one of our most fundamental freedoms in the country. And there's no place like a college campus where this happens. And I think another form of speech is just trashing higher education. And this isn't something that just comes from faculty who are mad at their administrators. Increasingly, it comes from people outside of higher education saying, you're really screwing up. You cost too much. You're too liberal. You're indoctrinating students. We don't like the way you run business. And we're not even sure that what you're teaching students is going to help them get a job. So that's a very American thing, not only to be able to say that, but I have been thinking about why it's so unsatisfying. We see think tanks put out these reports about higher education and how off base it is. Part of the problem, Andy, is there isn't a president of higher education. You know, if the country is polarized, usually what happens is we throw the bums out. We don't have that with higher education. We have a Secretary of Education whose powers of her own accord are increasingly diminished and seem to have almost nothing to do with running education anymore. That is an exaggeration, but they are intent on closing this department. And then, you know, we have college presidents who are high profile, like Alan Garber at Harvard or Michael Crow at Arizona State, but I don't think people hold them wholly responsible for higher education or could have a mechanism for voting them out if they wanted to. So what we're left with is this very unsatisfying internal conversation about how to change a thing that can't be changed by the traditional democratic mechanisms that we have. And I think that's part of what inspires all the rage around this. We don't quite know as a country how to reform these institutions that are quite calcified and lack a clear leadership structure.
Yeah, Jack. And one of the complaints that we hear, colleges don't have their priorities in order. That's somewhat driven by, you turn on your TV on a Saturday and you'll see college football. The same colleges that complain about being underfunded are in some cases sponsoring humongous, glitzy, gladiatorial spectacles on the gridiron. The complaints about college athletics have only grown, if you can believe that was possible, in recent years as the floodgates of money have opened up in the name, image, and likeness era, right? And there was just this headline recently about Penn State might have the new biggest college football stadium, right? That might eclipse the big house at the University of Michigan. That is a very on-the-nose expression of this idea that even as college leaders themselves are saying, like, this runaway spending can't continue, they're still embarking on these huge construction projects.
This is a $700 million proposed renovation of Beaver Stadium, which, as you say, might make it bigger than Michigan's stadium.
Maybe. We'll see.
Hard to cry poor in that environment. And I think what you're talking about, Andy, is excess and the degree to which colleges are symbols of excess. And we hear a lot about administrative bloat and all the different ways that colleges, not unlike the country or its bureaucracy, have kind of grown like kudzu. But I think that the sort of defining portrait of this, of college as a place of excess, remains the movie Animal House. And I think we would be remiss, you mentioned beer at the top, I think we would be remiss to not mention this 1978 film that I think still, despite all the changes in higher education, has a hold on people's popular imagination about what a certain type of college is for. And, folks who I'm sure have seen this movie know that this is the story of a fictional Faber College in 1962, and it's about these Delta frat brothers who are at war with Dean Wormer, who wants to kick them off of campus. And our colleague, Andy, I don't know if you've read this, but have you ever read Eric Hoover's piece about the 30th anniversary of Animal House?
No, I haven't.
It's fantastic. We'll link to it in the show notes. But he describes the main character, who is played by John Belushi, this is Bluto, as a slovenly symbol of irreverence, a bloated personification of the id. Bored by the past and future, he lives to party in an endless now. And I think for generations of college students and now for their parents, that has defined in part what college was about. Now, we know from covering the broad panoply of higher education that this doesn't reflect the experience of students at every college in America. But I think there's a reason that poster of John Belushi with his college shirt on can still be found in college dorm rooms. The idea that college is a rite of passage, a place for sort of hedonistic liberation, freedom, if you will, is deeply embedded in sort of the American psyche. And I was thinking today about this version of freedom as embodied by Animal House, these guys who do nothing but drink beer and goof off. And, it comes out about 20 years after Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And On the Road is saying, hey, you got to get out on the road. You need to leave society in order to find real freedom. And there was something very intoxicating, to use a pun, about the idea that actually real freedom is found within these institutions by rebelling against them, by rebelling against the figures of authority within them. And I think that remains a powerful sort of symbol about what college is, and it's a very American notion of rebellion. Now, I will say that Bluto was not writing 27 grievances and hoping that the college would divest from fossil fuels or Israel and hoping to reach some real detente. This was a much more anarchist vision of what student life was about. And probably the more culturally resonant view of young life in college now is Bama Rush than Animal House. But I have a feeling we're going to continue to talk about Animal House in 50 years. I don't know if we'll talk about Bama Rush. I think it's part of the iconography of higher education.
Well, Jack, I've never seen Animal House, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, wow.
I think I'm so irredeemably woke in my core that if I watched it, my eyes would just burst into flames. But I do think that the spirit of self-discovery and anarchy, as you say, will never leave higher education, right? Some things change while most things stay the same.
Right.
And college has changed a lot since the days of Animal House. But I think one thing that we have to remark upon is that college is a very durable thing in American life. It's persisted for these 250 years. Like, yes, it's changed in some ways.
Beyond that, many colleges will remind you they existed before the founding of the country.
Wow. That is an incredible live fact check, Jack. I really appreciate that one. But this is such a durable thing, both in reality and in our minds when we think about what is America. But it's easy to lose sight of the fact that colleges have gone through huge transformations. They've had low points and high points, points where colleges didn't think they'd be able to stay open, points where aspiring academics didn't think they could make a career in it, right? But higher education, because it's diffuse, because it's organized like a marketplace of sorts, has innovated, has adapted, and colleges have persisted over the years when many other American institutions have folded. And I think that durability is a very American thing about it.
Yeah. Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in, Andy. That's what college does. Just when you think it's gone, it finds itself as a way of being relevant and necessary. I will say that there are a lot of people who would question how much higher education has transformed or whether it's done so quickly enough. But I think we do sometimes underestimate how much it changed, particularly post-pandemic. Just the delivery systems and all of the changes that were made there. I think colleges deserve a little more credit there than they often get. One of the things that I've been thinking about in the nature of this conversation, Andy, is about the country as something that constantly evolves. This is a place that is meant to change. It's not meant to be static. When we talk about Make America Great Again, it's as if we could return to some kind of static period in which things are better. History shows us that that's not, in fact, what happens with the country or with institutions. They change. And I've been thinking about, again, reviewing these YouTube videos that are quite illuminating about the history of the country, Andy. This notion of forming a more perfect union. The idea that this is a work in progress. This country is a work in progress. These institutions are a work in progress. And I think perhaps the folly of the conversations that sometimes we have with people who are critical of higher education or who are defending higher education is that there is a misperception that there is an end to this argument. There's not. We live in the argument over how to make this thing better. We live in the argument about how to form a more perfect university. That is the natural state of things. And I think faculty in particular, who are maybe solution-oriented people, maybe I'm overestimating how much they like solutions, but people who want an answer may find it deeply unsatisfying that in fact the answer is that we're never going to stop arguing about this. This will be a constant series of conversations and arguments, and that, to me, is what makes higher education a quintessentially American institution.
It's a big mess, this sector and this country.
I'm so glad that we had a true patriot on like you, Andy, to sum up the state of the country in higher education. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
College Matters from the Chronicle is a production of the Chronicle of Higher Education, the nation's leading independent newsroom covering colleges. If you like the show, please leave us a review or invite a friend to listen. And remember to follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast so that you never miss an episode. You can find an archive of every episode, all of our show notes, and much more at chronicle.com/College Matters. If you'd like, drop us a note at collegematters@chronicle.com. We are produced by Mia Sullivan. Our Chronicle producer is Fernanda Zamudio Suarez. Our podcast artwork is by Cottrell Thomas. Special thanks to our colleagues Brock Reed, Joshua Hatch, Jillian Atelsic, Sarah Brown, Ron Coddington, Scott Seymour, Carmen Mendoza, and all of the people at the Chronicle who make this show possible. I'm Jack Stripling. Thanks for listening. We would like to thank our sponsor, Old Dominion University. Learn more about their commitment to higher education at odu.edu. There's another show I want to tell you about. It's called Learning Curve, and it's for anyone grappling with one of the biggest questions in education right now. What does it even mean to teach and learn when AI can do so much of the work for us? Learning Curve is hosted by my colleague Jeff Young, who also writes the Chronicle's new Jagged Intelligence newsletter about AI on campus. If you listen to Learning Curve, you'll hear from some memorable characters. A college student who demanded her money back after she caught her professor using AI, and a former university president who is trying to redesign college for an AI era. The show is full of insights to help cut through the hype and the fear around artificial intelligence. Check out Learning Curve wherever you get your podcasts.